Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Note Close Show. As always, Scott Carson, excited to be here with you today. I'm even rocking this morning with somebody who's a Cleveland native this morning, who's our special guest on here. And I think you're really going to love what he shares. Title of this episode is Rock the Recession for the most part, but I'm excited to have Jonathan Slane joining us this morning out here. Jonathan's book, Rock the Recession, is how successful leaders prepare for, thrive during, and create wealth after downturns, came out just a few months ago, September, and is the #1 Amazon bestseller. Jonathan coaches high-growth leadership teams across the United States to implement the entrepreneurial operating system, also known as Traction. If you've read that book, amazing book. I think every entrepreneur should read that. He focuses on working with entrepreneurial niche specialty firms and large corporations. He spends about a third of his year traveling and working with teams just like yours. So we are honored to have him here join us on the Note Closer Show. Good morning, bud. How's it going, Jonathan?
Dude, ready to rock. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, we're honored to have you on here. We're really looking forward. When you reached out to me and talked about, hey, your Rock the Session, I was like, oh, this is perfect. We got to spend some time on it. So I bet you're heavily sought after on podcasts and different interviews right now with everything going on in the industry, right?
Yeah, I think, a lot of what I talk about is really just good basic business hygiene. I decided to wrap it in kind of a marketing wrapper related to the next recession. But a lot of this stuff is stuff that business owners and investors should be doing in any case. And really, the original part is that how to prepare for a recession is a topic that's been written about a lot. And typically, you cut overhead, you try to survive, and that's how you prepare for a recession. My business partner and I were more interested in how do you look forward to a recession? And I think that's what's awesome for your audience, since they're real estate investors, note investors, and recessions can bring us massive opportunities. And so what do we need to do now, since we know we still have a little bit of runway till we're in a recession, to really prepare to take advantage?
Mm-hmm. Well, that brings the first question. Are we not in a recession? I've heard people say we aren't, and people say that we are, that we've been into it for a few months. What's your opinion or your outlook on that?
Yeah, so we're talking here right at the beginning of 2020, and I don't think that we're in a recession right now. I think, since the economy grew in the fourth quarter, albeit at a slower rate, that, potentially we could be headed towards some sort of a downturn. Most importantly for me, it's going to be at least 6 months from now until we're officially technically in a recession, because the government announces the GDP numbers a quarter in arrears. I don't want to bore the listeners with that, but for me, agnostic of what's going on in the economy, it still makes sense to prepare for a recession. So it's like, Scott, what if your biggest deal goes sideways? Or what if you find out that your business partner embezzled money from you, or your business partner decides to go across the street and start their own investing company without you? All of those scenarios that I brought up would put you in a recession as an individual investor, business owner, agnostic of what's going on in the economy. But I don't want to dodge your question. I do think a lot of what we're hearing in the news right now related to the United States and Iran, all of those political, geopolitical machinations that are going on could put us into a recession, because it's often a black swan event like a war or a geopolitical instability that will tip us over into a recession. And the issue is we can't see them coming. Mm-hmm. So the best we can do is really to just be prepared.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. What are some of the best ways that you share with your clients and investors out there? Some of the best ways to prepare for success during a recession is probably what I want to get at, versus just preparing, but things that they can put in place. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. So for me, the first step, what we call first gear, is to just assess where you're at. So it's to benchmark how you're doing as an investor versus everybody else. And on recession.com, which is the website, we've got a free 20-question assessment that we developed by just figuring out what are the things that leaders that made a lot of money and did really well in the last couple recessions, what were they asking themselves before the recession? And that's how we came up with the 20 questions. And we've gathered over 1,000 responses at this point. And for your audience, they should know that our average response right now is a 38 out of 100. So if you go to recession.com and you take the free assessment and you score above a 38, then you're probably more prepared than average, and below a 38, you're less prepared.
You're failing, basically.
Well, if you're 38 or below, then it's highly likely that in the next recession, your business is going to go out of business, or you're going to go bankrupt as an investor. And so the questions will guide you to what can you focus on, because that's really step 2. So step 2 is, now that you've benchmarked yourself, now that you know how you're doing versus everyone else, what are you going to do to start tuning up your business and your personal life? And I think for individual investors, that's why I'm so excited to be on with you. You really have massive opportunity, because there's a lot of things you can do as an individual investor to tune yourself up before you're seeing on CNN and Fox that we're in a recession.
What are some of those things that you've seen from some of your respondents out there that are scoring above a 38?
Sure. So one of them is to make sure that you have an appropriate amount of capital available. And that capital may be cash, it may be debt. Either way, do you have enough money to be able to weather a downturn? So it may be that you've got a war chest, so that in a downturn you can buy properties or you can buy notes. And because we know in a recession, obviously, that there's going to be that many more opportunities to buy distressed notes. So you want to have cash available. And if you don't have cash available, do you have a line of credit available? And that line of credit could be a business line. It could be a personal line. It could be a signature loan line, or it could be a home equity line of credit. I'm not sure, what vehicles do you usually see with your audience?
We see all of them, actually. I mean, retirement accounts, self-directed IRAs, having cash from cash flow from payments or rents coming in. Or even we work with Meryl Chandler from Get Fundable or Credit Sense, talking about how do you improve your personal and business credit profile so that you're able to get those lines of credit or credit cards that have low interest rates, and then being able to leverage that low interest rate to go out and buy high yield investments.
Well, one of the things that I love about this tune-up gear is that right now is the perfect time to have a conversation with your bank about extending your line of credit. Or how about this? What about going back to the bank and asking them if they'll reduce, cap, or just get rid of personal guarantees that you might have? I know that that sounds crazy and nobody's thinking about it right now, but right now, because the economy is booming, you can actually have those conversations with your banker. If you try to ask them to increase your line when we're in a downturn, or if you try to ask them to get rid of your personal guarantee when we're in a recession, they're going to laugh at you. But right now, banks are hungry for our business, so we can actually do those things.
Well, that's a great thing to say there, because especially as an ex-banker, the first of the year, banks make the most amount of money. They incentivize their bankers the most for lines of credit or loans. They pay them for checking accounts or other stuff, but they make the most out of their loan department. So the banks are in the business of making loans and doing notes. So at the end of the hey, it's a new quarter. They have a new year for your goals. So commissions and things like that, people are hungry. Bankers are hungry to do that because that's an easy conversation. And they're motivated right now more than anything else to make that happen. So I'm glad you brought that up, Jonathan.
Yeah, Scott, I have to admit, here on your show, I'm also a recovering investment banker. So okay. I get where you're coming from. And I think for me, you make a great point about how bankers are incentivized. So I just want the audience to think through that nobody's thinking about this right now, because most of us are flush. We're doing well. It's been over a decade since the last recession. And I'm guessing that a lot of your audience wasn't even investing maybe over a decade ago. And so they haven't been through a recession. They don't understand the full depth of the opportunities that they can bring or the pain that they can bring. And so that's where you want to spend time in that second gear, just getting yourself and your business tuned up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got into the note business because I left my mortgage business back in 2008 when everything hit the fan. And we've been talking about people, hey, that's why we like taking the opportunity of buying distressed debt at a big discount and working to rehab the borrower, to help the borrowers that have gone through their own personal recessions, to get them back on track and be a reperforming note, and having that cash flow roll in, and the fact that we're buying assets cheaper than most of the regular investors out there. They're buying at 85, 90 cents of value. We're picking things up well below that. So that gives us that extra capability if we've got to adjust payments or modify the streams or reduce rent rates to make sure we're still cash flowing and sitting flush with when things do take a downturn.
Yeah, all great points. So once your audience assesses where they're at, and then once they tune themselves up, then the third gear, the third thing we're recommending is to just race. That's where you're going to spend time doing things like implementing traction in your business. So you'd mentioned the entrepreneurial operating system, which is really just a fancy way of talking about a system for your business so that you can have a common vision, core values for the business. You can figure out how to hire the right people. I know that a lot of the audience is probably interested in starting to build a team. And right now with unemployment at record lows, it's pretty much the toughest time in the last 60 years in our country to hire great people, to hire A players. So Traction talks about what that can look like and how to systemize that process, as well as how to hold great weekly meetings, how to solve issues, what kind of scorecard to put together for your business, and then what the right cadence is for getting together with your team and refreshing all of that stuff that I just talked about. But now is the best time to do that because you have the luxury of being able to tweak things. It's very hard to tweak and improve when the world is blowing up around you. And for your investors, for the audience that is listening to us, they're all going to have such massive opportunities that they're not going to want to focus on the nuts and bolts of business. They're going to want to just focus on growing and going when we hit this next downturn.
Yeah, that's the thing is we've talked about for the last 8 years, we've talked about our niche in the note business only being 3 to 5 years before it was going to change. Well, it's stuck around longer than that.
Right.
You know, and we look at a downturn. I mean, especially we look at the number like mortgage default rates are at lows, 2.5% out there across the board. It's low, but there's a lot of new faces in the crowd, a lot of new originations, new homes being bought and sold or refinances. So it means there's still a lot of new mortgages out there. So that 2.5 default rate means a big number still for us, but it's a different animal. And those people that have done well, those investors have done well, it's because they've done exactly like you said. They've built a team, they've put systems in place, they've implemented EOS and read traction and go back to it on a regular basis. It's not something that you want to set it once and forget about it, right? John, it's something you've got to be working on constantly and tweaking and fine tuning, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things so with Traction, there's actually a bunch of other systems for running your business that predate Traction. I don't know if the audience has heard of the Gazelles program, the Rockefeller habits, scaling up, scalable. Traction is the most recent of all those that I rattled off, but it is derivative of all those programs. The one thing I love about it, Scott, is that it has a regular cadence for getting together and refreshing things, and that's quarterly. And that's what I really love, because I think that in a lot of cases, we do our planning for our businesses once a year. We do it on an annual basis. And now with so many messages, with social media competing for every moment of your attention and our phones being ubiquitous, I just think that getting together quarterly is really necessary to keep that strategic planning top of mind. Maybe 20 years ago, before cell phones inhabited every minute of our lives, it wasn't necessary. But now, if you're not going back to something like that once a week, once a month, once a quarter, I just don't think it exists anymore.
Yeah, that's a big thing. You're exactly right. People think and plan out their year starting in October, November, or January 1st, and they don't really spend a lot more time on it. I mean, they'll spend more time on their vacation than they will on their business planning or even their retirement accounts or their war chests we talk about. That's the big thing that I like to tell people, like, listen, every dollar you make, set aside something. Set aside 10%, tithe to yourself if you need to start putting that money aside. And then tithe to God or pay your bills with the other 90% out there. But people just get in the habit of, and I think that we see that happen a lot of times, people hand to mouth. I mean, everybody's got to keep it up with the Joneses. Very few people are scaling back their buying habits. Oh, I can go get a discount. This money's going to be around forever. That is not the case. And it's those people that have that mindset when the banks do reduce their lines of credit or reduce their credit card limits, or a deal goes south that you're not expecting, that if you don't have that extra on the side, you can really be hurt. And like you said early on, you can be in a personal recession when everybody else is doing well. I mean, we've experienced that in the past with ups and downs in our business, and anybody can have that happen to them. Even though most of them like, oh, it's never going to happen to me. It can happen. Even those with a job getting laid off, or those things can happen to put you in a recession, right, Jonathan?
Yeah, for sure. And you hit on something that's really personal for me that I want to talk about. So I actually turned off the green screen here. I'm sitting in my home office. So for the audience that is watching the video part of this, behind me, I think you'll see I've got what I'm calling this Slain Family Quest board.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, that's where my wife and I every year plan out what we want to do for the year, and figure out what our financial goals, what our business goals are, what the goals are with the kids. And so the reason I'm reacting to you bringing up this idea that so many people don't tithe to themselves, don't have a plan for what they want to do. And I just think that that's so critical for the audience and is a big part of recession planning, not only for business, but just recession planning for your personal life as well. Because we can all lose our jobs. We could lose a primary stream of income or a secondary stream. And do you have a plan for that so you're not trying to change the tire while you're going 70 miles an hour down the highway? So really appreciate that sentiment that you brought up.
Yeah, no problem. I love the adventure tabs over there on a month-by-month basis too. You're going to be in Europe in June, it looks like.
That's correct. Yes. So that's where we'll be. And then, yeah, we'll be in Myrtle Beach in August. But for my wife and I, it's just figuring out for us a year in advance. Like you were saying, most people are spending more time preparing for the holidays and planning the holidays than they do their personal life. And so for us, a lot of this recession planning bleeds over into what we do personally. And we like to plan out the adventures for the year and do that a year in advance. Because we found when we do that, then everybody else conforms their calendars to ours. Because so few people plan things a year out, that if we decide the week that we're going to Europe and we tell everybody that I work with, all my clients, and we tell everyone at her work, since she's a doctor, then everybody else takes vacation around ours and works around it. So I know that that's kind of a tangent, but I just love what you're talking about. So I wanted to go there.
So I actually was just talking about that in the previous episode we recorded this morning too.
Perfect.
Of putting it on the calendar and playing around that. Because honestly, people will not respect your schedule until you start respecting your own schedule first and foremost. Totally. And I love what you have there, the planning the stuff out and what you really want to accomplish. Not only just business goals and personal goals, but also adventure goals and having fun. And because that's what it's all about. I mean, we work hard, you should play hard too, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's that exact phrase is part of my life plan and part of the core values of what I want to do. I think to bring it back to recession, the way that I look at it is really that I'm not a big fan of this idea that everybody has to hustle and grind. And that's the only way to be successful in business today. So a lot of the business literature, a lot of business books right now, it's like the only way that you can really make a lot of money is if you've got your job and then you got your side hustle, you do your investing on the side. And then when you're not doing your primary job and you're not doing your side hustle, you drive Uber every waking minute except for sleeping 4 hours. And that's success. And I think Rock the Recession is all about how we can use a disruptive opportunity like a downturn to really 10x our income if we're smart about it and we plan ahead. And you have to plan ahead because recessions come around once every 7 to 10 years on average. And so they're not everyday opportunities. So you've got to be ready for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've got to prepare for the future versus just trying to, I laugh when you said the whole side hustle thing because I'm hearing Gary Vaynerchuk's words and
yeah.
You know what I mean? Hey, you got a side hustle, got to work your, That's not the case. You're right. You don't get me wrong. You work hard, for a few hours, but then, hey, you got to live. You got to recharge those batteries. You got to, if you're constantly only getting 4 hours of sleep, you're likely not going to be working for Uber very long or Lyft, because you're going to probably end up in a wreck of some sort.
Yeah, I'm not. It's Scott. I think we both know it's not about not working hard. I'm not saying you can do the 4-hour work week idea. It's just that the recession thing. The reason I look forward to the next one is because if you're an investor and you've got a war chest set aside, then you can buy into massive deals, opportunities, notes that aren't available in the market right now. But if you don't have a plan, so for the audience, I know you have a plan, Scott. So I know you've got money set aside so that you're ready to pounce when we hit a recession. You're ready to buy those notes that aren't available right now, but that from experience will be as soon as CNN starts blasting everywhere that we're in a recession. People panic. There's going to be foreclosures. People are going to file bankruptcies. And then you're going to be able to jump in with the money that you've set aside, with the line of credit that you have available. And if the audience doesn't act now, they're going to miss out. And then they're going to be sitting on the sidelines, just trying to figure out why it is that they never seem to get lucky, and not understanding that a lot of it is being prepared ahead of time and having a lot of these things done. So for me, that fourth gear that I'm trying to get everybody to shift into is being ready to acquire 3 things in a downturn, in a recession. The first is, how do you acquire other businesses that go out of business? So, maybe there's other investors that have a portfolio. They didn't listen to our show. They don't listen to the We Close Notes podcast because they suck. And so, they're not going to they don't get this great info. They're not prepared, and they go out of business, have a bankruptcy. That's one thing that you could do. You could buy in a recession. The second thing would be assets. So buying notes from other people that just can't afford to support them anymore. And that's something that in the Great Recession, I was very good at. I didn't buy distressed notes. What I bought was gym equipment. And the reason is that, I had relationships that I had pre-set up with banks, and they knew that I was a fitness guy, and they knew that I had cash. And so when they would have to repossess a gym's worth of equipment, the bank would call me and they'd say, Jonathan, we've got a gym. We just repossessed it. It's in New York City. Are you interested? And I'd say, yep. They'd send me over an Excel spreadsheet with all of the equipment. And then I'd look it over. It would be like $34,000 worth of equipment. And I'd call them back and I'd say, I have maybe $1,000 or $2,000 that I could send you as a cashier's check. And the guy would go, all right, let me call you back in an hour. They would call back in an hour and go, okay, if you overnight a check for $1,000, you can have the equipment. I hear you laughing already.
That's awesome.
The reason, Scott, is that banks do not want to own gym equipment. It's heavy as shit. You have to move it. So if they own it, they have to go and get the key to the gym. They have to rent a truck. They have to hire 4 strong people to move all the stuff. They have to go put it in a storage unit. Then they have to get it set up for an auction. They have to pay the auction 1/3 of whatever they make. And banks are not in the business of auctioning off fitness equipment, nor do they like to own, that we're both bankers. So we both know the Oreo category, the other real estate owned by banks. They don't like that. That's not what they want to be doing. They want to sell loans. They do not want to be owning real estate that they take back from people. So there's great deals. The reason I'm belaboring this point, though, is that the only way to get access to those deals is to start networking with bankers now, to have relationships so that when we hit the downturn, they call you because you're top of mind for them and they know that you're an investor that has a track record, that has cash. If you wait till we're in a downturn and you start trying to call your banker, it's too late. Because they've already the bankers already know they can just call Scott. Scott's got money. He's been talking to him once a month for the past 2 years. They know you're a real person. They're not going to waste time getting to know somebody new from the audience. They're just going to go to the people that they know, that they've done a deal with already, that has cash.
Such great words of advice there. That's the truth. I mean, a lot of the deals that we see now, and even in the back years, and we expect to see more, is the fact that we have just stayed in contact with the bankers with an email once a month, or hey, they've got my email for the last 6 months. Now they've got something they can move, or we've branded into their brain the green emails that we send out, our logo. They're like, okay, I got something. I'm looking to move now. Who do I know? I don't know anybody. Oh, I know Scott. Let me give Scott a phone call. I know Jonathan. Let me give him a phone call. So
being able to do some deal, even a small deal, it may not be the best deal, just so that you can start to have a track record so that you can close the deal. I just think those are tactics that can be implemented by the audience right now, so that they can start to get prepared. The last thing to acquire in fourth gear is that once we're in a recession, you're going to have access to great talent. So it may be that right now you're like, look, I've been trying to hire somebody to work with me for a year. I can't find anybody good. That's because A players don't advertise for new jobs, for new opportunities on LinkedIn nor on Indeed. That's not where A players go to find their next opportunity. They go to their network. So again, it's can you network now with 10 to 20 A players so that when we hit a downturn or when we get close to one and they start to get nervous about their current job, their current opportunity, because the owner of that business doesn't have a plan, and they start to think, where could I go? I know that guy Scott's been calling me once a quarter. It sounds like his business is growing. It sounds like he's got a plan with inverse investing for what they're going to do in the next recession. Maybe I'll give him a call and see if I can go work with him. That's how you can acquire top-level talent in a recession. Again, though, it takes prep right now to have that list of 10 to 20 people that you're talking to. A players don't just cold call you. They don't find you through websites, newspaper, etc.
Such good stuff out there, man. I mean, that's such the truth out there when you're hiring, looking to hire, expand your team. You got to pay for good people. Paying for good people and good talent has always been worth it. Because they're going to do more than versus barely getting by. And I know we've got students of ours that have they're buying assets. They're capped out what they can do individually. And I keep telling them, listen, you need to hire an assistant. You need to hire somebody now, get them trained. And I can't afford to. I'm like, you can't afford not to. That bandwidth, that bottleneck is you. You got to expand that up and add somebody to it to help you take advantage of opportunities versus just sitting there trying to nickel and dime yourself to death,
Yeah, well, I think another thing, too, is that for the audience that's sitting there, maybe some of them are rolling their eyes and we can't see them because they're like, look, a good assistant's going to cost $35,000 to $50,000 a year. And there's no way that I can afford $3,000 or $4,000 a month. I think for me, one of the other things that's great right now is that there are so many contract workers on sites like Upwork.com or Fiverr.com. And I don't have any affiliation with those sites, but I do regularly use them. Because if I need something typed up and transcribed for me, I can find somebody on Upwork that can do that kind of work, that loves it, for very inexpensively. Might be $15 to $20 per hour, and I can just buy a few hours of time. Or if I need a new logo designed, or if I scribble something down and I want them to make it look pretty for marketing purposes, there are so many people that can do that. And the best part is that since they're halfway around the world, often I'll send it to one of the people that I love to work with. And by the time I wake up in the morning, they've already got a draft back to me. So I think for the audience that may not be ready to make the full-time commitment to paying an admin, there's other ways to start to dip your toe in so that you can spend your time leveraged on the things that you're best at that really add value. Because I know that your story is part of that what you're best at is when Scott's on the phone, that you can really close deals and make things happen, but you might have to dial 54 times to get one deal done. And so you don't have time to be doing a lot of the logistical things. You can have somebody else support you with those details.
That's a big thing. Work at what your best revenue generating activities are and do that. And that's one of the big things that we learned from EOS is looking, okay, what am I paid the best at? And what's my hour worth? Anything below that hour, delegate those tasks off to somebody else in our office, my staff, interns, VAs, even, to get them to do that so that I'm a lean, mean, note closing machine.
Yeah, so in the traction world, we call it Delegate and Elevate.
Yeah.
And if the audience is like, I don't even know where to start with that, you can read the book. But the other thing, if you don't want to read the book, is that I would start, again, with assessing where you're at. That's always my starting point. So do a time study for a week. Every 30 minutes, write down what you're doing. Just 2, 3, 4 words. It might be sending emails. It might be phone calls. It might be bathroom. I don't need any more details than that. But just for a week, every 30 minutes, write down what you're doing. Or at the end of the day, some people prefer to go back through their calendar and write down what they were doing for each 30-minute chunk. At the end of the week, though, you should have a pretty good picture of where you're spending your time. And we know from time studies that most people spend 60% of their time on shallow work, on work that doesn't add any value, that doesn't move them forward. And then maybe at best, they spend 40% of their time on deep work. Those are the things that you're doing that really add value that nobody else on earth could do as well as you can do. And so you want to figure out what are the shallow things you're doing, what are the deep things that you're doing, and then how can you automate, eliminate, or delegate all of the shallow work so that you can spend more and more of your time on the deep stuff.
I love that. It takes me back to growing up. One of the first ways I learned that was traction, but also going back to the day working as a pool technician. My boss wanted to know what the hell I was doing every day, every 15 to 20 minutes. And I'm just sitting there getting my tan on, drinking virgin pina coladas, you know? So,
exactly.
But that's the best. That's one of the easiest ways to do it, to delegate it, or not delegate it, but to literally write it down, see what you're doing, going back and being honest about what you're really doing in those 15 to 30-minute chunks. And then picking the list, okay, what could I or should I have delegated? And things that I can do versus others, you know?
Well, there's 3 buckets for me. You can delegate it. And I think you've explained exactly what that is. You could get a VA, you could get your assistant to do it. You could automate it. So that's looking at, like, I know, leading up to our podcast, you had automated the process of reminding me about our podcast. I got automatic emails. I got automatic text messages from you. So I think the audience can think about, is there a way that you can automate some of the things that you're doing? So can you use apps to help your communication, your follow-up, even your the logistics for planning your trips and tracking all that stuff, or receipts or finances, whatever it might be. And then the last one, Scott, is just eliminate. Like, I have yet to see a time study where somebody couldn't just eliminate 10% of what they're doing and have it have no effect on their net profit. And so a lot of us, we just get complacent. You know, we do things a certain way. We don't spend the time auditing how we're spending our time. And so we've got a lot of waste in what we're doing. And so what is that 10% that if you just stop doing it, it really wouldn't have any effect, but you're just doing it now because you've always done it that way.
It's such true. I mean, that's the thing. We get in the habits of not wanting to do things. It's like one of the things that we do when we have sales with our educational stuff or our workshops, we automatically, anybody gets signed up for any of that stuff, I take 10% and put that aside immediately. So we don't even see it out there, you know?
Dude, have you read the book Profit First?
Oh, Mike's a buddy of mine, actually, the author.
Wait a second. Mike's a buddy of mine.
I met Mike originally at Podfest 2 years ago. Chris Cremosis introduced us together. And so I was actually going to get off the phone here and say, hey, you got to meet Mike if you haven't had a chance to. So it's funny.
All right. Well, we'll give Michalowicz a shout out for Profit First, which is the book that we both love. And Mike's an awesome dude. But yeah, I think that's brilliant. And then for me, the last gear in our whole rock the recession system is the emergency brake. So for the audience that's still with us, putting up with us, it's that if you should have an emergency brake. That's the traditional recession plan. So if we get into a downturn, or if you personally hit a downturn and all the stuff we're talking about isn't working, you're not able to pounce, you're just in a bad way with your line of credit or your war chest, and you're not able to acquire other assets, you need to have an emergency brake, a plan for what you're going to do. So if all of a sudden you saw that your cash flow was slipping and it fell to 90% of what you were projecting, what would you do? What expenses would you cut? If it slipped to 80%, what expenses would you cut, or what assets would you sell? And 70% and 60%, maybe down to 50%. it's the whole idea here is that when we did the research for the book, when we talked to people that successfully grew their businesses in the Great Recession, one of their secrets was to have a plan that they planned out in the cool, rational light of day instead of the emotional heat of the night. And because when we're in a downturn, and it's because you just found out that your partner stole a bunch of money from you, and you're pissed off and you're mad and you're disappointed in yourself because you didn't see it coming, you want to have a plan already written down on paper that you've committed to, instead of trying to figure it out while you're curled up in the fetal position in the corner of your office.
Such true words were never spoken. That's the big thing, is when we do get emotional, we often make horrible decisions, and that's why you've got to take the time. Never make an emotion. Never send an email when you're emotional too. If you're gonna write it, but don't send it, because you may end up regret eating those words later on when you're like, I was in the right space. And I think we've all done that at some point before. But you, out of the people that you interviewed with your book, is there one or two that really stood out with something that they said or a habit that they put in place that you were just like, wow, that makes so much sense?
Yeah, so the first one that comes in mind is Christy Hefner. She's CEO of Playboy after Hugh, one of Hugh's daughters. And what Christy told me was that at Playboy, when they saw the Great Recession coming, they actually started to invest more in marketing, to spend more money on marketing, because they knew that their competitors would spend less money on marketing in the recession. Because traditionally, the research shows that companies pull back on marketing in a recession. That it's one of the first things to go is spending on spending on marketing in a downturn. And so the ROI for Playboy goes up because for every dollar they spent, they had more eyeballs looking at their marketing. So spending more on TV, spending more on radio. So for the audience, it's thinking through, while everybody else is pulling back on what they're spending on marketing, can you increase it so that you can take advantage of those opportunities?
Yeah, that's a great thing, especially now these days. So much media is available at very inexpensive cost. You just need time to put it together with video and YouTube and Facebook and LinkedIn and all these things to get your word out and what your focus is to reach out to clients and things like that. But you're 100% right. Marketing is usually the first cut for a lot of things, and often that's the kiss of death, because nobody knows when they're there anymore for the most part. And when you are facing, you want to have that, hey, we're still here, we're still doing things. That's one of the biggest things that I think that's helped us in the recession, is when so many note buyers went out of business 10 years ago, and we were dialing for dollars and reaching out. People are like, right. Oh my God, you guys are still around. I got something for you that nobody else saw,
Yeah, no, I love that, Scott. And I think too, it's like for the audience, it wouldn't cost a lot right now to hire an Upwork person to help you put together a marketing campaign that has that tagline of "We're still here," and then you just put it on the shelf. As soon as Fox and all the other CNBC are running recession banners, you can start putting those ads out there. You've got to have them ready to go now, because we all know that developing a marketing campaign takes it minimum 2 weeks or a month at minimum. So to have it on the shelf now, to have it ready to go, I just think it is the kind of hedge that a lot of the audience can do for very little investment that could pay 10x returns.
That's such a truth of things out there. It does take some time. I was just talking about somebody this over the weekend. We've got an upcoming podcast summit that's online, and I'm like, you've got to start promoting, definitely promoting. If you want people to show up in a month, you got to start promoting. It's going to take a while for people to see it, to interact. 80% of sales are made for the fifth contact. Unfortunately, most people give up after the first one and don't do anything about it.
Exactly. So yeah, that was one of the stories. And then if you want one more quick one, the guy that I wrote the book with, Paul Belair, his story is that right before the Great Recession, he invested $1 million with his team to buy a company. They grew it over 63 months during the recession, and then they sold it for over 70 million. Wow. So again, for the audience that's listening, that's $1 million investment, grew it for a little over 5 years and sold it for over 70 million bucks. And a lot of how they did that was actually using the recession as a tailwind. because they knew that they bought a company that installed heating and air conditioning systems. And they knew that in a recession, people wouldn't want to install a new system, that they would rather service their existing system, because nobody wants to spend 10 grand on a new heating and air conditioning system. When we're in a downturn, everybody will spend $200 to $1,000 to fix what they got, to put chewing gum and duct tape on it just to get through. But they saw that trend coming, and so they focused their business 80% on just doing great service. And nobody else was thinking that way at the time, because most contractors love that quick hit of $10,000 to put a new system on your roof or in your basement. And so they were ahead of that curve. I think for all of your investors, again, it's just thinking through, what can you do now to set yourself up so that when the recession hits, it'll be a tailwind for you instead of a massive headwind.
So it's great stuff. Yeah, great points out there. Jonathan, what's the best way for our listeners and our audience members to learn more about you, or to take that assessment again? What's the best way for them to reach out with you?
Yeah, all my contact info is on recession.com. Yes, that really is our website. So all the assessment's there. The assessment's free. And then there's some other tools that people can buy if they like our stuff. My contact info's on there. It's just jonathan@recession.com. And then, Scott, I can get with you after the show and maybe get you a coupon code. So if the audience wants to go and buy one of the products, that would be great too.
That'd be awesome, man. We'll definitely put all those links in the description, on the blog, on the website, weclosenotes.com, out there for you for the podcast. Jonathan, man, this has been a fun discussion. We got to definitely have you back on at a later time again, talking about when things start to go, and dive into something. We got to get Mike on the horn at some point too.
Yeah, we'll do it.
Great. Thanks so much, Jonathan.
Right, rock on.
You too, bud. All right, guys and gals, that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Take advantage of what Jonathan offered up there. Go on, check out the assessment on recession.com. What an amazing website. That's $1 million website right there for him out there. But take advantage of it. It's always great to hear from previous bankers who understand the same mindset we do, taking opportunities, looking for opportunities where maybe others aren't looking, or just staying ahead of the curve and staying in contact with those connections. Maybe they don't have something today, maybe they don't have something tomorrow, but at some point they're going to have something, and they're going to talk and make sure and feed you because you're the squeaky hinge, the squeaky wheel. You stay in touch with them. So go out, take some action, everybody, and we'll see you all at the top, everybody. Bye.